Welcome, everybody, to Fantastic Farming number 6. It's right now October 16th, 2022, 10 a.m. in Japan. And I'm joined again by my wonderful friend, John Walsh. I'm Chuck Kaiser. I'm an organic farmer, among other things, in Kyoto, Japan. I run Midori Farm. And I do love spreading the word about organic farming and tips and tricks, because I've learned so much over the years from other people's videos and internet research and things like that. I think it's a wonderful way to share knowledge. And a lot of people say that you don't really know something until you've taught it. And I think that's very true, because when we sit down to prepare these presentations, we take a lot of time and effort to go through a lot of information and think about things in photos and past experiences, and to kind of bring it together to present it like this. It makes us kind of review everything and really rethink how we did things and how to present it to somebody else. And that is really a good way for us to reaffirm what we've learned, and even to question some things and to re-examine some things. But again, to spread the word and allow other people the chance to learn about these things, to know they're possible, how to do it, or how some people are doing it, to add their 2 cents, to say, hey, I like that, or hey, why don't you try this? And that way we become a stronger community of growers, because I think that now more than ever, it's important we realize producing our own food in a natural way that's beneficial to the environment, or at least not very harmful to the environment, is very important. And to pass that knowledge on, as I said, I like to do this podcast and some other videos on YouTube. My YouTube channel is Midori Farm. Please check it out. But my good friend John here is going to tell you all about the wonderful work he's doing to help spread the word to the people who probably are our best hope for the future, and that is young children in school.
Yep.
So that's all from me, John. Let's hear about you.
Yep. Good morning. Yeah, my name's John, as you may know. Yeah, and I'm basically the opposite of what Chuck does. I basically do what Chuck does in the city. I'm in Tokyo, and like, because of the environment here in Tokyo, pretty much all of the growing challenges are different. But there's a few similar ones, like insects and typhoons and so on, but the actual the growing space is quite different. Yeah, so the challenges here is basically how to grow food while dealing with shade from large buildings, and also how to find spaces to grow food in the first place, because many people think that you just need a garden in the ground to grow food. But if you live in the city, you'll be challenged to find places that are on concrete, on rooftops, on walls, on balconies, on patios, on streets even, to grow food. And it becomes really good fun if you take that challenge seriously, to actually find places that you can grow food. And there's a whole lot of places that you can grow food in the cities. And in fact, it's mind-blowing how many places there are. So yeah, this fantastic farming presentation that's been going, this is number 6 with Chuck, and I think it's a really good thing how Chuck's basically, he's an expert on countryside farming. I'm not bad at city farming, and we're sort of like combining both of those fields to present like a overall picture of how to grow food successfully, whether you're living in the countryside or in a big city, big cities like Tokyo. Yeah, and what I basically do is I've taught over 1,600 people now, mainly kids, yes, I'm coming close to 1,000 kids now, at international schools, how to grow food. And most of the younger 2 generations here in Tokyo, they simply haven't learned how to grow food, which is really surprising, because food is just so important. We all need it, no exceptions, but most people don't have a clue how to grow it. And yet it's so simple. In fact, it's sowing seeds is simpler than brushing your own teeth. Yeah, so I've sort of made it my mission just to tell and teach and train as many people as possible how to basically how to feed themselves without poisoning themselves by using toxic agricultural chemicals, which unfortunately has become the mainstream way to commercially produce food. So yeah, we're going to be talking today about how to get the most from your garden, how to maximize your growth, how to maximize your harvest, and how to find spaces that you might not otherwise be aware of that you can grow food. Back to you, Chuck.
Thanks, John. I don't know if you were going to speak about it, but I hope to hear something about your new venture with milk cartons and things like that, or milk crates or beer crates.
Oh, yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah, I've been thinking for a few years about how to basically convert empty building sites, like basically sites in the city where houses have been knocked down, or buildings have been knocked down, and also how to convert car parks into community gardens. And there's a couple of challenges there. The first challenge is how to actually do that, considering that with the in the case of a empty building site, you'll basically be dealing with old soil, and that's probably filled up with bits of smashed concrete on the part of the foundations. It wouldn't be a good place to start growing food in the first place. And car parks are typically covered in concrete or stones, and the challenge there would be not only how to grow food on an empty car park space, but how to convince the owner to let you do it. So the second point comes down to basically coming up with a financial formula that would show the car park owner that you can help them earn more money by converting, for example, 10 car parking spaces into a small garden, and show them how they can make more money by doing that than actually renting out the car parking spaces. And when it comes to the first challenge, how to actually grow food on an empty site, I've just come across some really interesting ways that they can happen simply using milk crates, where like you just get some wooden or plastic milk crates, put some liner inside them so that nothing falls out at the sides, add soil and start growing. And I tried doing that last weekend. I just bought like a little collapsible milk crate from the local 100 yen shop, paid 300 yen for it, put some liner inside it, added soil, and planted 4 plants. And no problem. It's really simple to do. And all you need to do is just upscale that. So like get 100 milk crates and start planting in them. And the good thing about using milk crates is that they're portable. So that if or when the site owner decides to start construction on the site, you can just pick up the milk crates and move them. And there's often like around the town that I live in here in North Tokyo, there's often a few months space between when an old building gets knocked down and construction of a new one starts. There's often at least 3 months, sometimes longer, I'm getting close to one growing season. 3 to 4 months is about one growing season, which if you can get in there with your milk crates, get the okay from the owner, start planting, you could grow a ton of food and share it with the neighbors and make them more aware of what's possible. And possibly right next door to their place.
I think that's a really good idea. A way to kind of, like you said, slot it in there.
Yep.
Just in time. But I'm wondering if you couldn't also find a way to have something of a mobile garden. I mean, if you've got some milk crates already full of plants, and you've got access to, well, I have a K-truck, which is the very small pickup trucks you see driving around in Japan. You could even rent one of those. It's just a few thousand yen for a day, I'm sure. But you've got these milk crates with various plants in them, even at various stages of growth. And you could say, okay, Saturday from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, I'm going to load these into the K truck and park over at this parking lot near a park where the kids are playing already, come out along and come out to the K truck in the parking lot and see the mobile garden. And you could even take the crates out, have the kids fussing with the plants and learning about them. Could be a great way to make a mobile classroom. And then if you do decide, hey, this is working, you can get several people going with K trucks and they all bring out their planters and we all compare how they're growing and what they're doing and things like that. I mean, this is really something that's exciting, John, because there's potential for this in the future. Like you said, to use a space that nobody ever would have thought of using. And for people to see fresh food growing there is so valuable and so appealing that it's going to be popular. It is. As soon as people see the garden, they walk by, they stop, they're like, ooh, is that a tomato plant or what is that, lettuce? Ooh, that looks good. And they want to know more. They're inspired and they just never expect to see it in such an urban setting like that. It's great.
So like you're basically talking about like a pop-up garden.
Yeah, pop-up garden. There you go.
Yeah. I had a similar idea after the Tohoku earthquake about basically having portable gardens. I thought about like a bed frame, a steel bed frame with the steel stretchy bits between it. And if you get like 2 bed frames and you join them at the top so that they come down like that, and if you put wheels on the bottom and a flat base to store gardening tools, you could hang lots of pots on both sides, and if it's got wheels you can push it and stuff. If you like loaded a whole lot of those into a train and sent them up to a disaster zone, you could just unload them, and each one of these inverted V-shaped frames would be the size of a bed. Each side would be the size of a bed, loaded with pots with food growing. You just take them out of a train, put them where they're needed, and there's food growing. And it would be a way to not just provide food source to disaster victims, but when it comes to growing food, people who have lost everything, having a garden is a start of the rebirth of their independence. So a garden's not just food, it's also hope.
It's so true. And I mean, it's been proven by several different people from several different countries. Researchers and psychiatrists say that the effects of a garden on your mental state is just incredible for relaxing you, for giving you stimulation that's very natural for the brain, especially in urban dwelling when people just don't see greenery, especially something lush like a lettuce or as interesting as a tomato plant. They're going to actually be able to touch and feel and taste something that's really, really growing. People are so separated from their food nowadays. I think it's just a wonderful step. Again, it's not forwards, right? It's almost a step backwards in time to when we all used to be doing that. We all used to have a garden because why walk to the store and pay money when you can grow your own tomatoes? Everybody just would grow them themselves. But we're so far past that in the land of convenience and wonder and high finance that we've forgotten the value, the intrinsic value, not only in the food that you grow, but in the process and everything in between. I think that's a great place to get started. If you're ready, John, what do you say?
Just a minute. I've just found a few more slides of this portable garden.
Would you like to show them?
Yeah, including on farms on a bus as well. Yeah, I'll just
go for it. If you've got them ready, go for it.
Yeah, got them. Here we go. Hang on.
Yeah. I love looking on the internet. I'm so inspired by what other people are doing. John, you always bring up these great images, so it's almost there.
You see something? Farm in a bus.
Seconds, I know it will. There it is. Farm in a bus.
Farm in a bus. So this is basically, it's an old school bus that's had the chairs ripped out and it's been renovated. And look at that. That's a mobile, like a mobile garden.
Sure is. It's a classroom too.
And just imagine like if there's another big quake up in some part of Japan, and a whole fleet of these filled with food like that was going up the highways, going toward the disaster zones, and they parked up there. I mean, this is instant garden. This is pretty good stuff. And the next slide is what I was talking about before. I'm looking at the attached bed frames. This is what I call a mobile farm, Meals on Wheels.
Meals on Wheels.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this here, like I said, it's basically 2 steel bed frames welded together at the top, and there's a base put in down the bottom to store your tools and water tanks if you need them. And then you basically clip on flower pots and planter boxes, and you can grow tomatoes up the side, like you can see. And this is just one. And if you have
wait, go back. I really like the little rain capture area you got there as well.
Yeah, oh, yeah. So that's like a plastic sheet with a water tank that you can set up wherever, and that helps to get water for your garden.
Yeah, I think one of the things that gardening lessons would lend itself to is not only, producing our food, but the circular systems involved with it, that we can really become more sustainable, following the natural way. And it's that sort of connection and that sort of feeling that also inspires us to do more and to learn more. So I think that's fabulous.
Yeah, and then the end view of a fully loaded mobile farm would look like that. Can you see that? This is the end view.
It hasn't changed yet.
Okay, hope I'm in sorry, that's the wrong presentation. I'll try the right one.
That's all right.
Try this one. Mobile
there
farms,
it is.
fully loaded. Yeah. So just imagine, right? This is just one, and it's and the vertical height, it's a little bit wider than the width of a bed, of course, because you're using bed frames. This is just one. Just imagine an empty car park crammed full of these. Just one car park with lots of these, and you just basically roll them on or off the car park if they need to be moved. Yeah, and that's just one idea.
Now, John, does Tokyo have a botanical garden? Kyoto has a really big, nice one.
The botanical garden, yeah, there's one in Shinjuku Government Park in Shinjuku. They've got a heated botanical garden there.
Indoor.
There's one in the town that I live in, Akutsuka in North Tokyo. Yeah, we've got a botanical garden there. It's all outdoors though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I wonder, I mean, that would be an interesting place to approach with this idea and say, hey, why don't we put a few of these together and have a day where people can come out and learn about food growing rather than just trees and flowers, which is wonderful. But I think having something like this would make it really easy and accessible for somebody to come in and install it in a day and then be able to pull it away in the same day. It's not like you're doing a permanent installation.
Yeah,
it's something quite mobile. So
these could be the pop-up gardens, like you were saying before. I mean,
yeah.
And like instead of people having to go to a established botanical garden, these could just be taken to different parts around town or like around the city and put like next to big shopping centers. Yeah, they could basically be put anywhere.
Yeah, that's a good shopping centers, because shopping centers love this sort of thing because it draws people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just imagine if these were sponsored.
Right.
That could be the way to make it happen.
I see your future blooming already, huh? That's great. All right. Well, feel free to keep going with your presentations, or we could swap out whatever you like.
Yeah. Well, do you want to go with your first?
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Well, I see the next one is about what you're doing there. You want to talk about that a bit before Staggered Sowing?
Yeah.
Urban farming?
Yeah. I think I pretty much covered most of that. Yeah. I basically teach at schools mainly and teach privately too.
The slide hasn't changed for us yet.
Private urban farming consulting, and I'm basically into specializing now in like rooftop farming and vertical farming, which I was teaching on Friday at one of the schools that I teach at. And basically teaching girls how to grow food on walls and fences and gates and in thin air as well, which I'll cover a bit later. Yep. So yeah, so today we're going to basically be talking about companion planting. What plants can be planted next to other plants to prevent insects from eating the main plants. We're also going to be talking about interplanting, what plants can be grown between other crops to increase harvest, including sowing seeds in the gaps to maximize the utilization of soil in the ground. And we'll talk about how to grow baby leaf, which is probably the fastest way to get food. And then we'll get on to talking about vertical farming, how to grow food on walls and vertical spaces, chain gardens, and greenhouses.
All right, John, if you want to stop your share, we can move it along.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah. Technical stuff.
Yeah, it always bogs us down, doesn't it?
Okay, yeah, that should, yeah, done.
I don't know about you, but how many times I've been waiting for my printer? Oh, it just kills me. All right. Well, let's see what I've got here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Go on to this one. All right. Getting the most out of your garden. Now, this is something that you start to think about when you start growing things. I think probably the average person who grows anything starts with a single plant in a single pot. It could be a house plant, could be a tomato or a flower, something like that, whether it's on a windowsill, outdoors, or in your guest room. You know, it's something that you have a single plant that just brings some greenery or some life to a space. And then perhaps you become attached to it because it's particularly lovely or rewarding, or it gives you some nice food or something like that. And of course, everybody has gone through the epic failure of forgetting to water or some sort of mistake that just absolutely kills that plant. But eventually, for some of us, we're lucky enough to have some success and to want to do more and more and more. And eventually that leads to just this point John and I are talking about today, which is getting the most out of your garden. Whether that garden is a couple of planter boxes, whether it's a small garden out in the backyard, or whether it's a fairly large field like I have up in Keihoku, where I'm growing. I've got 80 cucumber plant or 80 cauliflower plants right now. Match that, you know, that's just cauliflower. So that's what I'm talking about, trying to get the most out of my space. I have to do a lot of things such as crop planting, fertilization, you know, these sorts of fertility tests and behaviors and patterns and things like that. It's a lot of work. But also the things that John and I talk about today are very pertinent. So that being said, I'm going to start with staggered sowing. This is something that John and I both talked about before. So I'm just going to briefly go through it. Staggered sowing is basically, sowing is when you actually put seeds in soil or in some medium to grow. And it could even be the sprouts demonstration that John was nice enough to talk about last time, where there actually wasn't any medium except water and seeds in a net. But still, that is actually sowing seeds when you actually want the seeds to start their growth cycle. So staggered means just doing it in a fashion where you're not doing all your seeds or plants at the same time. So whether you're planting seeds or baby transplants, you're not putting them all into the garden at the same time. Why would anybody want to do that? I mean, isn't it more work to bring them all out there and then the next week to do it again and do it again? Well, again, this is to get the most out of your garden, because probably even if you're a larger grower like me, and I'm not a large farmer, I'm actually a small farmer, but 80 cauliflower plants sounds large, but still, what I'm going to do is I'm going to time my planting so I don't get 80 cauliflower on the same day, because that's just too hard to sell for me. I don't go to a market and sell them all at wholesale price and be done with it. I want to sell them slowly over time to dedicated customers and at farmers markets and things like that. Plus, I want some for the family for a couple of months. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to time my planting so some of them come ripe sooner than others. And that is the benefit of staggered sowing. So Fast growing things like John was speaking about, lettuce or baby leaf, radishes, which is one of the fastest growing vegetable that you'll grow actually from seed to full adult in 30 days. Green onions also grow really quickly. There's lots of different varieties of them. The most popular Japanese negi actually takes quite a while to grow up, especially if you start from seed. But they're quite easy things to grow up from seed and then let those small baby seedlings dry out and then put them out at your leisure into the garden so that they grow up fully mature, again, in a staggered fashion. Best sellers, again, like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, tomatoes, cucumbers, summer or winter vegetables. Staggered sowing is a good idea. Again, this is so that not everything is coming ripe on the same day or at the same week or even in the same couple of weeks. If you want to eat cabbage, you don't want to have to store 16 cabbages in your fridge for 4 months. You want them to start coming ripe later and later. So you've only got 2 or 3 in your fridge at the same time. That is a great way, is if you just plan your garden out so that your cabbages are coming ripe over time rather than all at once. And tomatoes and cucumbers now, you can do that as well. And the great thing about tomatoes and cucumbers with staggered planting is twofold. First of all, you're extending your harvest time, much like with the broccoli or the radishes or the baby leaf. You'll just get some plants and some fruits coming ripe later than others. But at the same time, I've had this happen multiple times, is I'll plant out a row of, for example, cucumbers, and I'll have some seeds that I'll have left over. So, okay, I'm going to throw these in as well, and I'll plant them out in a month or so later. And so I'll have those coming up, and suddenly I find, the crows have come along and taken a liking to my cucumbers, or worse, the aphids or the cucumber beetle. Oh, they're awful, nasty, horrible things that will just devastate my plants. And again, I don't spray chemicals. I'm all organic. So it's hand picking and prevention. So staggered sowing has saved my vegan bacon in more ways than one, because, okay, well, I know where all the cucumber beetles are this year. I'm going to plant these second row, this staggered sowing. I'm going to do it on a different field, and they're going to come up later, and I'm going to get most of those because that's not where the cucumber beetles are. So the staggered sowing is a great way for larger growers as well to make sure that they can get the crop that they want, even though it may be a month later. Now, smaller plants like carrots, beets, and leafy greens, again, like John said, this is really what you want to be stagger sowing, because they don't take up a lot of space. So if I'm going to plant a 27-meter bed all full of carrots in the same day, that's not a problem. It'll take me 3 hours to do the whole bed, and that's from rake to rake, because I rake it flat, plant all the seeds, and I rake it flat again. And I mean, from those times, that's 3 hours. Easy, 27 meters, 4 or 5 rows of carrots, done, watered in. But why would I want all those carrots at the same time? I mean, think about it. Carrots grow this far apart. And if you've got 27 meters of that in 5 rows, thousands and maybe even 10,000 carrots coming in right at the same time. Now, carrots are something you can leave in the ground for even a month later, and that's not a big deal. But still, you stagger plant those, and it's going to be much more efficient. Same with beets. And of course, leafy greens, as John said, one of the fastest growing things. You don't want that all coming at once. And again, unless you're wholesaling it, or unless you're having a big party and you want it all cut at the same time. Again, leafy greens are great because you plant a row of it, and then the next week you plant another row of it, and then another, and you've got 3 or 4 rows, because if you've got 4 rows of leafy greens, week 1, the first row comes, you plant the first one, and by the time and then you wait a week, by the 4th week, you planted the 4th one, you can go ahead and cut that first row. And the next week you cut the next row and the next one. And by the time you're done cutting the 4th row, that first row is ready to cut again. That's the great thing about leafy greens, is it's cut and come again. And not only lettuce, but you can put beets in there for the beet leaves, radish leaves, kale, broccoli is a good one as well. There's lots of other different plants you can plant with your baby baby leaf to bring out a lot more vitamins and minerals to your table and a lot more flavor too. So that's all I've got to say with that, John. I'm going to stop my share and hand over to you now.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, just a couple of questions about that. You mentioned lettuces. How long? What's the fastest growing type of lettuce that you've grown?
Well, the thing about lettuces is there are a couple of different groupings. I don't want to say families, but groupings of lettuce. The main grouping that I can consider is one that's grown for leaf and one that's grown for head. Okay. And it's usually the leafing varieties that are the fastest growing because it's a smaller variety. Now, I have experimented in the past and grown out some of these leafy lettuces to head size, and they're just big and awkward, and the leaves get quite tough and a bit too almost leathery in a way. It's not that it's very heavy, but it doesn't do well when it gets to be full size. So it's much more appropriate to go them out to a smaller size. So if you do a little research on the internet, you can find listings of what's a head lettuce and what's a baby leaf. And back in the day, until about 6 years ago or so, I would order these seeds and I would get 110 different varieties of seed, organic heirloom seeds. And they would always send me 10 different varieties of lettuce. And I'd have to immediately sit down with a pen and write head lettuce or leaf lettuce, because they'd give me butter crunch and French mignonette and red leaf and green leaf and all these other things. I would have to do all these research and like, okay, that's actually a leaf lettuce. And that one of the secrets is if leaf is in the name, like a golden leaf lettuce, you know it's a leaf lettuce, but it's not always going to be that way. And of course, head lettuces could also be grown out as baby leaf. One of our favorites is probably, what is it? Sunny lettuce is probably one of the most popular ones with the green with the reddish top on the leaves. That's a very popular lettuce in Japan. Great to grow out as baby leaf or as a head lettuce.
How many kinds of lettuces can you buy in the shops in Kyoto?
You mean for seeds?
No, like if you go
in the supermarket,
to your local supermarket, how many different kinds of
good
lettuces
question
can you buy?
Well, first of all, they have got the awful iceberg lettuce that I'll never touch. And then they've got the green leaf, and they've got the sunny lettuce. And then I often see the machu, I think it's called.
Sanchu. I think
Sanchu. Is that what it is? Yeah, it's more of a kind of smaller, squatter, heavy green leaf that they use for Korean barbecue, the yakiniku. You put that in there, and but it's not bad in a salad either. So basically 4, maybe 5 different varieties, but not very many.
Yeah, I've only seen about 4 up here in Tokyo. We've got the sunny lettuce, green lettuce, maybe romaine lettuce, which has got the long.
I've seen romaine sometimes,
and also the sanchu one, which I prefer. I like the shape of the leaf. But yeah, that's only about 4 different kinds of lettuces max. I don't know how many there are in the real world, but what's a rough number of like lettuces that you can buy that you can actually grow from seed? What do you think?
Hundreds for sure. Several hundreds, I would say. Probably 300 or 400 at the outside. I'll look on it. I'll look for it when you're doing your thing, and I'll come back.
It's really simple. It's like that with apples. We can only buy, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 different kinds of apples in the supermarkets. But I found last year that in North America alone, it's possible to grow north of 300 different types of apples. But there's only 2 main ones that are sold in the shops. Fuji being one of them, and there's one other one. And the only reason that these 2 types of apples are in the shops is because they can survive long journeys on trucks without going soft. And the other types, they go soft quickly. And if they're going to be trucked like thousands of kilometers across your country, they'll get to the destination, but they won't really be they'll be too soft by the time they get there. Anyway, so just getting back to staggered sowing. I've got some pictures to put to your words.
Good one.
And it looks like this when the technology works. Staggered sowing. Yep, has that come up? Oh yeah, good. Yeah, so this here, the little diagram to the left on the left-hand side of this page shows what the first mistake I made when I started growing food, and that was I just dumped a whole lot of seeds and started growing. Um, so lots of seeds in the same weekend, and then they all grew. And about a month later, I had a lot of food and picked it all, and then found I had none left. So that sort of made me think, right, that wasn't such a smart plan. So I started staggered sowing, which, like you were saying, Chuck, is when you basically stagger the times that you sow seeds. And if you have a job, then yeah, probably the simplest way to do that is just to go outside and sow seeds each weekend during the growing season. And they would come up like the picture on the right-hand side. The little ones would, the first ones that you sowed would obviously come up first, and then each weekend that you sowed seeds, the plant growth would come up like you can see on the right-hand side there, and you would just pick the leaves that are ready to pick first, and then either sow some more seeds or plant some seedlings. And staggered sowing, super simple, but it can extend your harvest time by months if you do it correctly. Yeah, so instead of just having and growing food just for 1 month, yeah, that kind of time frame, if you just sow your seeds at just one time, you can extend your harvest by 2 to 3 months easy, just by staggered sowing. Yeah, and this probably works for most vegetables, but yeah, one thing that you mentioned, Chuck, was if you're having a party at the schools that I teach at, the ones with the large gardens, I normally run a salad lunch event for the kids at the end of each urban farming program that I run, and I normally set a date for that, for example, mid-June, and then I need to plan backwards and think, right, spinach takes about 4 weeks to grow from seeds, so I'll set the salad event date, for example, middle of June. Go back a month, that'll be the middle of May. So I know, right, that's when I'm going to be sowing spinach seeds. And the baby leaf seeds, they take 12 to 20 days. So I basically work back, and I do that with all of the plants that I'm going to be planting for the event. But then I leave some leeway just in case the event gets cancelled due to rain. Like if it's raining and we need to cancel, then I might have to shift the event date to a week later or a week earlier. And if I've been doing staggered sowing and sowing seeds on consecutive weeks, then it's not really going to matter when the event date is, as long as it's not a different month. The staggered sowing process should basically cover that, so we'll have enough leaves ready for the lunch. Okay, yep. So that's it. And staggered sowing, yeah. So you basically just sow your seeds at staggered intervals, and re-sow as necessary. When you pull out the plants, if you pull out the whole plant, then of course you would have some space. But if you're just sort of picking leaves, then you can either sow some more seeds, including in the gaps, which I'm going to be talking about very soon. Okay, so yep, that's that, Chuck. Just stop the screen share. Yep, Chuck.
Fantastic. That's great. Very, very good. And let me go back to what I was doing, which is this one here. We're going to talk a little bit about interplanting. Now, staggered sowing is when you sow seeds at different times. So then maybe you sow your seeds and you've got, like I said, 3 to 5 rows of carrots. Well, you're going to space your rows so your carrots have room to grow. I mean, that's what you basically do. Usually when you're planting just about any plant, the space, you're going to plant those plants in a row. The space between plants is X. And then let's say you've got 2 or 3 rows of those plants. So let's say the space between the rows is Y. Well, usually the space of Y is bigger then the space of X. So if two carrots in a row are going to be, let's say, 5 to 10 centimeters apart, well, then you've got two rows of that. Those two rows are probably going to be 10 to 20 centimeters apart. It's often about double how far you want the rows to be spaced, because things like carrots, especially, the leaves get quite fluffy and big. And even though the next one before it and after it in the row are kind of crowding it, they've got space on the sides, those carrots grow up really big, nice and juicy. Whereas if they're all kind of jumbled together, they don't get that way, and your carrots get scraggly and never really sweet. So interplanting is when you can kind of take advantage of those gaps between those carrots or between your tomatoes or something like that. Now, things about tomatoes and carrots is they take a really, really long time to grow. A really long time. I mean, a good sized carrot will take 90 to 100 days from seed to table. Tomatoes as well, especially if you're growing like the full size tomatoes. When you very few people direct sow tomatoes. They always put in a transplant. But if you go back to when you actually sowed that seed into a small container to grow out that transplant to where you get the tomato on your table, you're also probably looking at 70 to 90 days. So even though you put your transplant out, and then probably in 40 to 50 days, you're going to start to see fruit, you've got a couple of months usually, of growth time for those plants, be it carrots or tomatoes or what have you, to put something in those gaps to grow up faster, like radishes that take 30 days, or lettuces or something like that, even beans that can just take about 40 or 50 days. And suddenly you've got beans and you can just harvest them all at once. And pretty soon those tomatoes are too big and they're shading out those beans, but it's okay because you've already got your beans. So again, tomato transplants best planted a meter apart. So something like beans, radish, or lettuce, really good to go in there. Shallow and deep-rooted vegetables together, like onions and carrots. Well, I think you can guess which one, the onion or the carrot, is a shallow or deep root. Clearly, the carrot is a winner for depth, and onions have very shallow roots, so they really don't compete for nutrients and water and space in the soil. Again, you're not only thinking about the space between plants, you're not only thinking about the space between rows or the space to get sunlight, but in the soil as well. That gives you that added dimension to consider, like, well, there's actually space in the soil to grow something else. So let's just do that, but maximize the space, because this has shallow roots and this has deep ones. Now, one of the classic companion interplantings is probably the three sisters, which is corn, beans, and squash. And again, squash, for those of you who don't understand it, is a very American word, not just North America, but South and Central America as well, for the family of zucchinis and pumpkins and summer squash and things like that. If you've ever heard of a yellow squash or things like that, this is where all these vegetables originated. So we have our own term for the family, and it's called squash. And so the squash has basically the same habit. Zucchinis are quite bushy, but just about every other squash variety is quite viney. Vines like what a watermelon would do. It's just really, really long vines spread everywhere. And these were first started by Native Americans to grow these three things together, because as you can see from my illustration, the corn supports the beans give the nitrogen, and then the squash with its big leaves, it really shades out the weeds. So everything grows really, really well. And again, it's staggered planting. You plant the corn first, and then the pole beans, and then the squash seeds. What's a pole bean? A pole bean is a bean that likes to climb up something. And usually people will put a net or some bamboo poles or something like that for those runners or those climbers to climb. Whereas a bush bean, like most of our green beans or French beans, are small bushy plants that don't need that. You don't want to grow small bushy plants with corn and squash. The squash will just choke it right out. But a pole bean will climb right up that corn stalk quite efficiently. Now, this is a great example of plants helping each other, as in companion planting. And this is a question that was, this topic was inspired by a question from our last Fantastic Farming. and we didn't have a full time to answer it, so I thought we would address it today. There's again, I went back to the books, not just the internet. I went back to one of my books, and I wanted to see, okay, what about this companion planting? And one of my favorites said a lot of it, there's a lot of companion planting lore out there. Lore meaning a body of knowledge, of course. And it's difficult to deny that because so many people talk about it, but it hasn't exactly been scientifically proven. So it's kind of tough. So you might hear some things that actually seem the opposite, or some things that seem quite crazy. So it's hard to really get a firm grasp of what is good companion planting practices. So when you do your research, take it with a grain of salt. If you're growing stuff, it's not just for the end product. Remember that it's for the process. The process is very rewarding and very wonderful. So you're going to learn something. There's always a learning curve there. But some plants do have proven effects scientifically on growing environments. So this is what I've come up with for people to talk about companion planting. French marigolds, great flower to grow just about anywhere in your garden. It's very hardy, it's very showy and pretty. It draws in beneficial pollinators, and its aroma is so strong, though not really for us, but to insects, it does suppress a lot of insects. And one of the things it also suppresses is nematodes. What's a nematode? It is kind of like an odd-shaped worm that lives in the soil, and I'm going to say one way to think about them is two varieties. And that's the way we think about most things because we're very human-centered. Ones that help what we want to be doing and ones that hurt what we want to be doing. And the ones that help us can control be controlled by these French marigolds. Sometimes nematodes will nibble and eat the roots of your plants that you don't want them to eat. So that would, of course, damage, if not kill, your plant. And these French marigolds could be a good solution to that. Now, if you're like me, and if you've ever dug through your soil in Japan and found those little white grubs with the orange head, that's a baby beetle. That's basically also going to eat the roots of your plant and kill it if it can. And so these are really dangerous, and there are beneficial nematodes that actually will parasitize those grubs, lay eggs in them, and the babies will go in and kill them. So again, French marigolds, it's a mixed bag, but it does seem to have some effects. Catnip, which is a very popular plant in the States. It's actually a variety of mint. Some cats just go crazy for it. And it does evidently repel several insects, including some beetles. Now, catnip is invasive, as is most of the plants in the mint family. So be careful when you put it in an open area. Easier to put in a container or in a closed space, or to be very vigilant about keeping that under control, because even the best of the invasive plants will just completely shut out anything you're trying to grow by just taking over the bed completely. Garlic, or kind of a garlic onion variety called nira here in Japan, can deter aphids. Easier to plant these nira than garlic. Garlic takes quite a long time to grow, whereas this nira is more like a green onion kind of thing where it grows quite quickly. And these are great for deterring aphids. They're quite strong smelling. And fortunately, I was hitting on some of the things that, I thought are good for me to talk about because they actually affect me. Flea beetles, aphids, and cabbage moths. These are things that absolutely invade my farm. And mint, sage, and rosemary are supposed to repel the cabbage moths, which I haven't tried yet, but I would like to try them by planting some of these herbs that I like to eat around my cabbages and broccolis and things like that. But allelopathy, I'm not sure how to say if it's allelo or allelopathy, but this is the inhibition of seed germination and plant growth by certain plant compounds. This is a real thing. We should be concerned about this. Fortunately, there's only a few things that you really need to watch out for. Walnut trees, especially black walnut, has one of the most deleterious effects on farmers' growth. Now, they're not very, very popular in Japan to see a walnut tree, even a black walnut, but it may come up. And if you're collecting leaves or twigs, the compost from the mountainside, or from even some shrine gardens or some school gardens or something, make sure you look around for walnut trees to see if they're involved. Because if you do compost that material and then use that compost in your soil, you may again have very poor results with that compost. Again, just look online for what does a walnut tree look like, and you can recognize the bark and or the leaves, and also the actual walnut. Fennel. Now, this is not a very popular plant in Japan. In fact, I don't think I have ever seen it in the supermarket, but I have grown it for a few years, but this was about 8 or 9 years ago. And I grew a whole great line of it. And I didn't realize at the time, but my other plants were suffering because this discourages the growth of most plants. So if you are going to grow fennel, do it in a container or in a corner of your garden away from everything else. Now, the worst news is sunflowers also have this horrible effect on your plants. And I have never been big into growing sunflowers, but last year when I took over somebody's farm, the nice lady who I took it over for, she planted some sunflowers for me here and there in the garden. And some of them came up right in the middle of my beds of onions and cucumbers and things like that. And they really, I don't remember them having such a horrible effect, but from now on, I'm going to make sure I never do that. So sunflowers are the big one, because who doesn't love sunflowers? Again, just like fennel, put it in the corner of a garden or a container where it's going to be safely tucked away and sequestered away from your other plants, because it may otherwise have some bad effects. And John, that's all I've got for that. I'm going to stop my share and hand it over.
Yeah, that was really good. There's 2 questions. Have you grown using the 3 sisters method yourself?
I have not. And I just don't have good luck with corn. Monkeys just absolutely love corn. And I grew great corn the first 2 years of my farming adventure, I'm just going to call it. And then the monkeys found me and I never was able to grow it again to the point where I could eat it. So, I learned about the 3 sisters subsequent to that. So unfortunately, I've never actually tried it out. This is something that you're going to do is sort of, again, this isn't proper scientific gardening, even though it's a scientific principle, because you're going to have just squash vines everywhere, because squash doesn't stay in its lane. It just grows where it wants to go. So if you plan on walking through there, you're going to be very light-footed so you don't step on the vines, because once you step on a squash vine, you're killing it. To harvest your beans and then finally your corn. So it's going to be a bit of a tricky thing. I've seen people do it in one small area of their garden and have some success though. But again, squash vines also like to climb a lot. So be careful when selecting your squash varieties. Perhaps a butternut would be a good one. Although they do like to climb if they can. They're one of the least likely to, but a kabocha might also work well. So.
Okay. And yeah, and just the second question was about companion planting. The way I've interpreted and read about companion planting, it's always about pairs of plants. For example, like what plants to grow next to tomato plants so that your tomato plants don't get killed by insects. So the plan is to basically plant a plant next to your tomato plant that will keep the insects that will hurt the tomato plants away from your tomatoes. While you were talking, it just made me think, well, what about if there's a 3rd or 4th plant nearby? For an example, if you plant marigolds next to your tomatoes, for example, if they help to keep the insects that hurt tomatoes away from tomato plants. And what if just next to the marigolds, you've got a plant that that could be harmed by the insects? What I'm basically trying to say is that if you have lots of plants in your garden and you're just thinking about the companion planting pairs, like I'll plant this herb next to this vegetable to keep the insects away from the vegetable. What if the herb attracts insects that will attack the plant on the other side of the herb? So we're not just thinking about companions, we're thinking about like multiple plants. Have you thought about that?
Well, that's a great question, John. Again, our gardening techniques are probably different because when I plant tomatoes, I've got 27 meters of tomato. I don't have anything else in that bed but tomato, and I do marigolds with my tomatoes. I often do basil with my tomatoes, those two plants. But I don't have any other kinds of plants in there that might otherwise be affected by insects
Oh, right. Okay.
to the marigolds or the basil.
Yeah, no, I've been thinking about that because at the community garden plots that I've grown at, I've always had a big mix of different plants all within like 15 square meters. I've had like tomatoes, I've had lettuces, I've had cucumbers, I've had chard, I've had herbs, the works, all in one tiny plot. So insects, if they come over, they're going to see everything, and they may well land and touch and lay eggs on lots of different plants because they're all so closely all growing so closely together. Yeah, so that's a huge difference.
Well, I think that's a lot more challenging, but it's a great idea. And one thing we haven't ever talked about is trap crops. Trap crops are something you'll plant that will draw in all those insects quickly and early. And then basically when your other plants start to go in, you're ready to put those in, or when they're starting to really come up, you take that trap crop out and you kill it. And all the eggs and all the babies that are on that are gone.
Right.
So that's a great way in maybe your situation to kind of nip it in the bud, so to speak.
Yeah. I've never heard of that. I'll have to do some research about that. Yeah, that's
trap crops. Just look it up and you'll find out some of the best ones. And again, you're sacrificing something that just might be wonderful to eat, like a broccoli or something, but it's gonna get all the first wave of those insects, which is often going to make a huge difference because an insect's life might be 30 days, and so if you catch that first generation and get them out of there, you're eliminating thousands and thousands of future generations. So
trap crops, never heard of it, but I'm certainly going to check that out. Okay, yeah, I'll just get on to sowing seeds in the gaps.
Go for it.
Which is something that I've basically come across at the school gardens that I've been working with over the years. Has the screen changed?
Yep.
Yeah, good. Yeah. So this is basically, it's something really, really simple. And it's basically where if you look at the photo to the left-hand side of what should be on your screen now, you can see lots of seedlings or plants growing there. And if you just look at the gaps between them, and if you look at the picture on the right-hand side showing the tomatoes, and just look at the gaps between those two tomatoes, there's lots of space there. And I sort of quickly came to the realization when I was checking out one of the school gardens that I work with, that I could hardly see the soil because I had so many seedlings growing there that had large leaves, which were blocking the view of the soil. But when I lifted up the leaves, I could see there's a whole lot of soil between the plants that simply wasn't being used. And at a rough guess, I thought, right, I've got what looks like a loaded garden here. I can hardly see the soil, but I'm probably only using about 10 or 15% of the soil, because there's only the part of the soil where the main stem of the plant goes through. There's all the space around that. So I thought, right, let's do something about that. And like you were saying about before, Chuck, about basically like sowing seeds and interplanting. That's what I got into doing and started sowing seeds like between tomato plants. And the key, I think, is to sow seeds of plants that will grow to harvestable size before the larger plants around it, before their leaves grow too large that they create too much shade for the plants growing between them. So like you're saying, Chuck, that basically comes down to growing fast growing greens usually, but maybe root vegetables like maybe hatsuga daikon, radishes, 20-day radishes, baby leaf. You're looking at about up to 20 days to grow these. Sometimes like between 12 to 20 days. Mizuna is pretty fast. That germinates pretty quickly. And salad spinach, kind of like a large baby leaf. Yep. And so the point is to basically like just look for the gaps and sow quick growing vegetables in the gaps so that they'll be able to be harvested hopefully long before you start picking the leaves from the bigger plants around them. And this is a raised garden at one of the schools that I work at. This is all baby leaf. This took about 25 days or so from seeds. And this kind of thing could be done between larger seedlings. And this basically maximize. This uses all the soil, as you can pretty clearly see. Yep. So that's sowing seeds in the gap. So that's a really good way to basically to max out how much food that you actually grow. And if you grow and pick your baby leaves or your fast growing crops, you can just sow some more seeds while the bigger ones are growing. It's probably good to be cautious if you do this around cucumbers, simply considering how large cucumber leaves are. Yeah, and how cucumber plants, they create their own shade and will block the sun from shining on most plants growing between them if they are planted sort of relatively close together. Yeah, so this is basically how to max out how much food that you grow from your soil. Okay, so yep, and yeah, okay, I think that's about it for that topic. Chuck, do you want to jump in, or
I wanted to ask a
next?
question while you've got this slide up, if that's okay. I noticed this is a nice baby leaf lettuce bed you've got here. I have a question. I see the supports for a floating row cover or a net, and I see the net tucked away back there. Which of the plants in there do you think the insects are most going to go for?
Mizuna, which is in the second row from the right.
Mm-hmm.
I find that that's pretty insect friendly. They like going for Mizuna, and they can destroy it within days. Yeah, so in this garden we just set up these little insects traps and put a net over it to keep that insects away, and that worked. Yeah, but Mizuna, and also yeah, I find that that the vegetable leaf that the insects tend to go for first is Chingenso.
Yes.
Also called pak choi and pok choi in Chinese. Yeah, Chingenso, that's really popular.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny to note, but the lettuce, the baby leaf lettuce, they don't care about that. The one crop that humans love to eat raw, insects won't even touch.
Well, they probably know what's more nutritious, and it's probably not the lettuces.
That's right. I agree with
Yeah.
you. Because I seem to see a few broader leaves in there that might be baby radish or baby.
Yeah. Yep. I think the ones on down the far left, I think they're radishes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know the bugs will go for those.
Yeah. I don't know. It usually depends on where the garden is. I mean, like when I set up a garden for the first time, I usually just like sort of cross my fingers and hope that insects won't find it. But I know that they will at some point. I
got to tell you, that's one of the big advantages to being in the city versus being in the country. You think you got bugs? Oh boy, we got everything under the sun times 10, and they'll all find me and be ready, because there've been farms there for literally 1,000 years. 1,000 years people have been growing their own food in this area that I'm growing. 1,000 years of insects learning where they want to live. I mean, come on.
They know where the food is. That's amazing. Yeah, because like I said, when I do set up new gardens, especially rooftop ones. I get a garden on a rooftop that's totally visible for insects flying over. They'll notice it. But if it's a garden on the ground, maybe underneath trees, then I'll be a lot more hopeful that the insects won't find it, at least during the first season. But they will find it. Yeah, they will find it. It's interesting. Yeah. Also, one more thing. It's a bit of a sidetrack, I think, but maybe related is when it comes to heat. This Mizuna, and I think it's spinach as well. I've noticed that when the temperature hits about 29 to 30 degrees, both Mizuna and spinach start to grow flowers,
Oh, yeah.
and then the leaves just turn really bitter. Yeah, and I think those two plants, they should probably be growing close to each other so that they can be covered with a shade sheet when the temperatures are climbing towards the high 20s. Just like here, I've got these blue struts to put a insect net over, but they can also be used to put a shade sheet on. Yeah.
Yep, you are right. Those two plants, and also the one you mentioned before, Chingensai, those will bolt really fast on you if it gets too warm. So gotta be careful. Gotta be careful. All right. Well, I don't have much to say about baby. If you want to go on to vertical farming.
Okay, yeah, vertical farming. Yep, this is one of my specialist topics besides rooftop farming. In fact, this is probably my main topic area of specialization. I don't like this farm that you can see here. This wall farm. This is like a module set up where there's basically like I think about sort of 1 meter square blocks, like you can see on the left hand side of the photo, and people just insert seeds and seedlings in, and you can basically make up a whole wall like this just by putting these 1 odd square meter module blocks next to each other, and you can basically make a green wall like this as large as you like, and then just connect water pipes like between them to water it all. Kind of high tech. But starting with the lower tech stuff. Vertical farming. Okay, yeah. First of all, what's the point? Well, the point is, in cities like Tokyo, there's a lot of space around cities that can be used to grow food, and walls are probably the first place to look. And if sun shines on a wall, then it's possible to grow food on it. So the picture here shows tin cans. They're probably screwed to a wall and filled with soil and plants grown inside them. This picture here, stainless steel buckets just hooked to what looks like a pre-made wooden fence. So this uses wall space instead of ground space, which is important if you want to keep the ground clear and tidy, and if you want to have to actually like utilize your floor space, especially if it's on a balcony. You can just keep the pots, keep your gardening gear off the floor and keep it on the walls. This is a small shelving unit, which lets you grow vertically. And yeah, vertical farming is good if you want to add color to your growing space and fragrance, especially if you want to grow herbs and so on. And also, if you don't really like your neighbors very much, you can create like a vertical plant setup to block the view. This here is just terracotta pots strapped to a wooden cargo pallet. This one looks much better. Lots of plants there. Parsley, Italian parsley, basil, what looked like jalapeno down the bottom, rosemary, mint. That looks really good. This one here, this is a frame garden. I've got one of these out the back of my house right now. It's just a wire frame that I picked up from the 100-yen shop, tied up to the wall with a bit of string, and just hook flower pots to it. This here is a good way to incorporate recycling into your gardening process, just using and recycling plastic bottles to grow food in. They can be put down a wall, or as you can see in the photo to the left hand side, drying up in thin air, and that would help to create like some privacy if you're not so keen on your neighbors. This next photos here, they what I've done at schools just recently, like this week. This is basically recycling 2-liter plastic PET bottles into growing containers, and we just use zip ties to tie them to the fence. And a 2-litre plastic pet bottle, they can be used to grow herbs, most herbs, and small vegetables. That's pretty handy. Ladders are a good idea to grow food vertically. What else? Oh yeah, this is on the side of a balcony, and it's 2 steel braces that you hook over the top of your balcony wall, and they support planter boxes. Yeah, so this here is on the side of my balcony here at home, and it's on the outside edge, not the inside edge. So this is basically suspended about 10 meters above the ground below. I could use a whole lot more of these, and as you can see, they're growing lettuces in there, 3 lettuces in the 1 container. Back again to walls. These are recycled water roof drain gutters that have been screwed to a wall and used to grow food. You could cover your whole wall with those. This here is on my balcony here at home. It's just the main thing here is the shelving unit that the arrow is pointing to. This is just a kit set shelving unit that you can pick up from most home stores for about 4,000 yen. And they normally put inside houses and offices, but I put this one outside and then just put some planter boxes on it. So I can basically grow, I can use the space that the shelving unit's on and grow food vertically, and basically multiply the use of that space by about four shelves. That's good. This is one of my favorites here. It's basically wooden planting units that have been screwed to walls. And this is really cool. I think that, just imagine that if you're walking home from work, or your kids are walking home from school, and every street that they walk down has these, and these could be used to grow vegetables, tomatoes, you name it, lots of different food and herbs. And just imagine if all of it was free, and every street had planters like this in your town. Just what a difference that would make. Yeah, this here, this custom built planting containers. The one to the left is really similar to the one we just saw on the previous screen. These can be attached to any walls and used to grow things as large as cabbages. This is the one that we saw before. This is like a prefabricated green wall unit. I've seen a few of these around Tokyo. This here is smart gardening. This has got a angled frame, and you can see the cucumbers growing on the top of the frame. The farmer here has most likely purposely chosen the cucumbers because they have such large leaves, which create shade for the smaller plants growing beneath them. This is probably growing during summertime when it gets really hot. Green curtains. These are sort of coming into fashion these days. Good to create cooler houses, but also to grow plants on the outside. These are typically the plants that are used to create green curtains are typically flowering ones, and also ones that grows late vegetables. Then if you don't have a wall or any sunlit space at all, that's no problem. You can just use chain gardens, which is simply a garden on a chain. And if you just think of a clothesline, where you would normally hang out your just washed clothes to dry. Chain gardens are exactly the same concept, but you just hang on what I call chain pots. And these are some example chain gardens that I slung up at a school I was teaching at on Friday, 2 days ago, just to show the students there about how simple these things are. Just a chain and you attach the ends to fixed locations and then hook flower pots or cut in half 2-litre PET bottles to them. Yeah, this is how to make a PET bottle chain garden. You just basically just cut your PET bottles in half, punch holes in the bottom for water drainage, add some pot stones down the bottom to stop any soil falling through the water drainage holes, add soil, plant something, and then just hook them to the chain. And these chain gardens, they could be slung up between neighboring buildings. They could be slung up over empty car parks. They could be slung up from a high point to a low point, like from the side of a building to the ground. And these could be used to grow food pretty much anywhere, on rooftops too. And the chain gardens that you've just seen, they're typically slung horizontally, but they can be set up vertically down the side of a wall, like you can see to the right here. So if you have like the side of your house and you can get outside on one of the higher floors, you could just sling a chain garden down vertically down the side of your house. Okay, so that's chain gardens. Yeah, and that's a really good way to basically grow food in thin air when there's no other place, or if you just want to have fun and try something that you've never tried before. Chuck, are you there?
Yeah, you can go ahead to greenhouses if you like.
Okay, yep, I got greenhouses now. These are basically do-it-yourself greenhouses. And yeah, so when it gets cooler in like late autumn, it's a good idea to think about how to keep your plants warm so that they can keep on growing into the start of winter. And do-it-yourself greenhouses is a pretty simple way to do it. And the picture that you see here is what I teach at some schools. Basically recycled juice or milk cartons. Just get some chicken wire and make a little frame thing, and then you can put them inside a bag. These are larger planting containers here, but the same concept. And you put them inside a bag, and with the milk cartons, if you put them inside like a shopping bag, you just tie up the front, just to close the front to keep the warm air in, and they can be used at home. There's a pretty interesting thing that I found out about this. If you put a planting container in a plastic bag, or if you put a planting container, if it's enclosed in plastic, when it gets cold, condensation is going to form at the top of the bag. And if you go outside on a cold morning and you're growing food in a plastic bag like this, in a planting container or some kind of other kind of container, if you just sort of gently tap the top of the plastic, you'll get the condensation just going to drop onto the soil. And the condensation is basically like water from nowhere. It's like water from nowhere. It's just formed due to the condensation process, which will cut down your water use. So greenhouses, they basically the one to the right, which I got some kids to make at a school, that's basically a greenhouse that can be upscaled to what I'm sure that you're much more used to, Chuck. Yep, and you'll notice on the picture to the right, the little holes. That's to stop the environment inside the plastic from getting too hot during summer, and it'll keep most of the insects out too, hopefully. Do you have something to add to greenhouses, Chuck?
Yeah, sure. I think we've only got about 10 minutes left anyway, so
yep.
I've got some other things to talk about if it's all right. Go back to my screen share here.
Vertical farming.
Vertical farming, I don't do very much of, because on a proper farm you want to be spread out, but I have created this some sort of vertical farm here in my side yard right next to my house here in the city. And this was inspired just to grow out my baby transplants last winter into spring for my tomatoes and peppers and things like that. And you can see there's grow lights in there and several shelving units and containers that right now, at that point, I believe most of that was onions. And my onion transplants are just about ready to put out in the farm, maybe next week. And I also have some broccoli and cauliflower there at the top. So this is an easy way for me to make a vertical farm, because where I am in the city, I don't get a lot of sunlight. I have to use artificial light. And these are grow lights you can buy online. And I also use tarps, because again, in the winter, it just gets too cold, especially if you're going to grow out your summer vegetables like peppers and stuff. The soil needs to be a certain temperature to germinate. And so I have heating mats underneath that, and then I close it in with tarps with the artificial light, and they're all ready to go and ready to grow. And this is basically what's inspired me for greenhouses. And I'm going to build something of a greenhouse this year. And quickly, I'm just going to show you, this is the disassembly, but you can imagine in reverse the assembly of a fairly decent sized greenhouse. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this share. And I am going to share a different screen, this one here.
Greenhouse assembly.
Are you seeing that? There we go.
Yep. We can do that. Assembly.
So basically, they have this greenhouse already set up, and you can see it's about 2.5 meters wide and about twice as long. And they pull their truck into the back of it. And I've inherited this greenhouse. And this was the instructions they sent me on how to assemble it in reverse. So basically, they say just back the truck up in there. And they use 2 pieces of plastic for the door that can then be kind of pinned closed. And so they put the general plastic around the greenhouse, except for the opening of the door. And then they use 2 other pieces of plastic for like the door. And this is them taking the door off, but they're just using these things called pacas to kind of clip these 2 pieces of plastic to the door, like that. And then they need to take off the actual plastic around the greenhouse. And you can see that most of these greenhouses have netting at the bottom, because eventually your greenhouse is just going to get too hot. Even if it's just late April or May, the sun's going to come out and it's going to heat that place up a little bit too much for your transplants. So you want to be able to pull the plastic up from the bottom to allow airflow, but you don't want a lot of things getting into your greenhouse like insects and birds and things. So they have this netting in place already so that when you pull the plastic up, it's still protected. And then how they lash the plastic down with this strong black string. And they use these really strong anchors that are these heavy really strong bits of metal that have a curlicue at the bottom, and you have to screw them in the ground with a machine or have 2 guys working with a pipe to get them into the ground. And then that is not going anywhere. So once the greenhouse is tied down, even a typhoon won't take it away, which is very important, of course, in Japan. And just showing how to actually lash it to it so that the greenhouse is steady and in place, and how they're taking it apart like that. And then how they're actually taking the plastic off the top. They remove the pacas, take that off, just like that. And there's a lot of little connectors and stuff for the different pieces. But it's pretty interesting to see how these things go together and come apart pretty easily. And again, the K-truck there and inside the thing really helps to get to the high places. And then, of course, folding up the plastic nice and neatly so it can be reused. The spacing between the poles is about 55 centimeters. And the spacing from the ground to the mid bar is about 140.
Yep. It's a bit like assembling a tent.
Yeah, it is kind of like a tent. You're right.
Like a tent, yeah.
That's right. And it is a kind of tent, I suppose. It's a plant tent.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of these different connectors and things like that to make sure it all fits together snugly and easy to take apart as well as put together.
It's a lot more complicated than I would have expected.
Yeah, well, when you think about it, though, that thing has to sit out there in typhoon weather. You want it to be sturdy, but also lightweight. So that's why they've really engineered them. I mean, Japan is probably one of the premier countries for greenhouses because A, they love their agriculture, and B, they've got their typhoons. So those things have to withstand. And a lot of them don't, but a lot of them do. So that's basically what to do. Some tools necessary, but basically the takeaway is here, get some help because it's a big job. And I'm going to try to put this together this year, see if I can make it work. But yeah, that remains to be seen. Yeah, John.
When do the local farmers usually start setting up their greenhouses?
I would say probably they leave the frame up probably year round.
Yep.
But depending on where you are, if you get snow, especially where we are, we get heavy snow. You better take that plastic off for the winter. Otherwise, it'll get too heavy and it'll just break that plastic. So I think they leave their houses up full time, and then they put their plastic on probably around mid to late February, depending.
Yeah, hey, disappointed about the snow and the roof. I don't know whether you've seen pictures of Scandinavian houses. They tend to have like really high roofs.
Yep.
Specifically, so the snow doesn't settle on them.
Yeah.
Like lots of like Norwegian houses and like houses in like Finland and so on. They've got like really steep roofs. That might be a new idea for greenhouses.
Well, they have those in Japan as well. They're called kominka, the old traditional mountain houses.
Oh, that's right.
Houses
that's right.
Have that really high pitched roof. But the problem with a greenhouse with that is, of course, it's going to catch a lot more wind. And being so lightweight, I think it would have a deleterious effect on it. But not a bad idea. And I'm sure some people have thought about it and tried it. But again, when you see something in Japan that's being used by everybody, it has been tested and has come through and with flying colors. Because like I said, in any given year, you might get one typhoon, you might get none, you might get 7. And those greenhouses are vital for a farmer's welfare. So they know what they're doing. So I just kind of follow along. But it's a good point. All right.
Yep.
I did want to say one more thing about this. And that's basically something I'm very excited about, which is a new composting system using black soldier flies. Now, this is something that I have been doing accidentally for years. And that is that I have these big compost bins and compost piles where I often find these large maggots. And I always thought, ooh, that's not so good. And then my favorite radio guy that didn't tell me specifically, but he did say to everyone that black soldier fly larvae are incredibly good for the compost pile. And I looked him up and I found out, hey, that's a black soldier fly larva. Well, black soldier flies, and I'm going to stop the share so I can kind of show you the photo. So I believe that I did find them here. Can you see that?
We've got the list that you had on the screen before.
Oh, okay.
7 benefits of the black soldier.
There we go. Let's stop that share and go on to this one. That's what I want to do. Now you can see here, these are black soldier flies. This right here, this insect is the black soldier fly itself. The second row down, second from the left. That's what a black soldier fly will look like. But their larvae look just like maggots, as you can see. And it's worldwide phenomenon for people to use these in their compost piles. So this is not something pertinent just in Japan or anything like that. So I'm going to go back because I got to show you back to my list, which is here. Soldier fly larvae will break down food much faster than worms will. Also, animal products are allowed. You don't put ham and turkey and chicken pieces and beef pieces into your worm compost, but you can put them in with the black soldier fly. And also the black soldier fly, easy to catch the grubs, and it's a great source of protein if you've got chickens. It breaks down whole carcasses without any smell. It keeps pest flies far away. How does it do that? The soldier fly itself is perfectly harmless. It doesn't even have a proper mouth. So it can't bite humans at all. It doesn't have a stinger. It can't bother us at all except land on us. But its larvae mass in the soil and just eat everything so quickly. And probably their urine creates such an acidic environment. It's toxic to housefly and many other things like cockroaches that we don't want in our compost pile. Again, a good thing. And it reduces disease transmission because they can basically kill the salmonella that might grow in your compost pile. So these things are amazing. This is just tip of the iceberg stuff. This is stuff I've just started researching in the past week because basically I'm a super composter. I've got 5 of those giant bins, literally 5 of them, not all together in different places, in different fields. Plus I've got 2 bays that I did homemade in one farm, one huge one that I did in another, and I just want more and more. But these black soldier flies are so amazing at composting things so quickly that I'm going to try to set up a proper program with them. And this was mostly inspired by the fact that what I wanted to do was set one up with worms. But there's a special kind of worm you want for composting. And I thought, I could just use any worm. That's not necessarily true. There's a special worm for it that's not readily available in Japan as it would be in my home country of the US, where you can just order them online or dig them in your garden. Here, they're quite difficult to get and expensive. So instead, these black soldier flies might be a great opportunity for me to set up a home composting system and then actually start producing these for other people to use for themselves. Because this is something that you can do really quickly, compost all your waste and really quickly with very little smell and very little fuss, and then use that compost in your garden. So very exciting.
It's interesting that you can compost meat as well, because I always thought that with compost you never put meat in or bones. But
that's
the black
right.
fly sound like a pretty amazing insect.
It is. It's incredible. And also that animal waste can also be put in there. I have yet to check it, but if that's true, then people with cats and dogs in the city who are just picking up that poop and throwing it away or flushing the toilet, if they can put that in there, that's a game changer. I mean, I've looked, and livestock manure is okay, but I have to look more because they can do meat, because they can do other sorts of feces. It's very possible that pets might be as well. So, I mean, imagine, John, if you could have a little garden plot set up with one of these composters in it, and you put every little bit that your cat and dog make, your newspaper trash, your mail trash, all your food scraps, every single thing you've got into this bin. And in 4 weeks, you've got the greatest compost for your potted plants.
Yeah. So you're saying that the larva breaks down these things that you put into the compost bin.
That's right.
How long, do you know roughly how long it takes until the larvae hatch and become these black soldier flies?
Yeah, the black soldier flies only live for like 47 days or something like that as an adult. And then they, within a couple of, within that period, they need to find a mate, do their business, and then the female will lay, and she doesn't lay eggs, she lays larvae, live larvae. And those, she'll lay them right next to a composting pile or something that's edible for them, and they just go to work in there, and then they grow up, and then they eventually become adults again, and the whole cycle repeats itself. And it's quite fast cycle. But I've looked at some videos online, and this woman has these timed videos where she fills up one of these containers with ham and fat and bread and newspaper and all this other stuff. You think, like, I wouldn't put that in my composter. And in 4 weeks, it's soil.
Wow, that's amazing. Sounds almost too good to be true. But
Exactly.
Video, it must be true.
Exactly. Well, I've already got them. Like I said, I've already had them in both of my farming locations in the country. And what I'm going to try to do is see if I can create a system using the greenhouse thing I just showed you, set that up inside one of my shops. I have a big enough shop to do that so that it's going to stay warm, put a little heating mat in there, and see if I can keep these soldier flies alive through the winter, feeding them household compost waste and wood shavings and paper products. And then in the spring, really hit it hard with some hard research like, okay, this is a great system to have for the home. This is a great system to have for the farm, because that could be a really great way for us to help spread sustainability.
Do any of your neighbors use black flies, black soldier flies?
Nobody I know uses them intentionally. Intentionally. But any farmer that's got a stack of decaying plants in the corner probably has black soldier flies helping them to break it down, as well as earthworms and other things.
Yeah, interesting.
It's very interesting.
Yep, we've kind of gone over time, but yeah.
We have.
Abigail, do you have any questions that you've got from watching what you just did?
Yeah, she's been very patient.
Yeah, Abigail, do you want to turn on your speaker?
Maybe she stepped away from the computer. Yeah, well, John, if you did have anything else to add, go ahead. I don't mind that we're over time.
Yeah, not really. I think we've covered a heap today.
We sure have.
Stuff. Yeah.
Well, I got to say, this black soldier fly thing is something I am going to really put myself into, because it's kind of, the Venn diagrams are overlapping for a lot of things for me with this, because I had the designs for a worm composting bin all set, homemade from Japanese available stuff.
Yeah.
But then I found out I can't get the worms. So if I can use these black soldier flies instead, boy, I'm going to go into full production of these things and hope to just spread this composting wave all through the city, because we're throwing away our kitchen waste when it could be used for valuable things. And when we could be just putting it back in the soil, we're burning it. You know, it's the worst thing to do. So I'm highly motivated to see if I can get this working, because again, especially if pet waste could become, I mean, you know what they actually said? I did find this, human waste is okay. You don't put human waste in with your worm, but evidently human waste is okay for the black soldier flies. So
yeah, all right. Yeah, I've heard that Chinese farmers put human waste on their crops as basically like fertilizer, just like you would use fertilizer.
Well, the Japanese used to as well. My friends in the mountains said that they remembered when they were kids, sometimes they would buy a haksa, you know, a Napa cabbage at the shop, and there would be a strip of newspaper kind of folded into that. And that strip of newspaper was what they used for toilet paper. So that was I don't know if I'd want to find that in my cabbage, but they were laughing at the time. They told me.
Yeah, food came with a fertilizer. That's a good idea.
And my wife, So I know that human waste is possible, but I believe it needs to be fermented, or I don't even know. I've heard of people just going out and doing their business on their field, and that's enough. So
just leave that to another show.
That's right. Or another group of people. But anyway, very exciting stuff, John. I'm always glad to hear what you have to say about growing in the city. I love your ideas for that your move forward with milk crates. I think that's a wonderful idea. I think that's another feather in your cap for your vertical gardening and your mobile garden as well. Your pop-up gardens with the A-frame you got going. I think that's a wonderful idea. To get that out there, and so other people can see an actual garden in action. You know, that I think is the trick, is they go to the supermarket and they can see the finished product. Let them see it in action. Let them see that, and then the next step is just to put a seed in the soil themselves, and it's not much further away from just seeing it in action. So really excited.
Yep, that's good. So we're going to plan the next one soon.
Sounds good. Yeah. It'll be November soon, so I don't know what we can talk about. Maybe putting the farms to bed for the year, or
maybe how to basically that's a good idea. and maybe what to do at the end of this season to get ready for spring.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's-
Yeah. Fallow years. What what farmers like used to do, basically like stop growing and just give their land a break.
Mhm.
Yep. Interesting. Yeah. No. Yeah. That was really good that you mentioned those black soldier flies. Is it?
That's right.
Yeah.
Look them up.
I
There's
had no
great,
idea.
great videos out there.
That's an amazing insect.
Yeah, I mean,
they should be paid. They
the
should be paid
series-
for their labor.
Actually, the series that I watched is just very amateur, done by a woman in Australia. I'm actually going to reach out to her and tell her how much I liked her videos and see if she'd be interested in, coming on the show with us, maybe talking about it.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Oh, looks
All
like
right.
we got a message from Abigail there. Anyway, I'm glad you enjoyed it, Abigail. We were inviting you to come on if you'd like to unmute and even show us your face. Say thank you for joining us. If you've got the time, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And oh, there you are.
Hi, how are you? Hi.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Where are you
Okay,
located,
yeah,
Abigail?
yeah.
Cuba.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, so urban farming, and yeah, I'm thinking now, how can I put some chains up here? Yeah, mansion, so yeah, how can vertical gardening?
John, which side of that building or the house would you recommend to have your chain garden installed?
Oh, just the side of the house that gets the most sunshine. Yeah, but yeah, I've hooked up chain gardens on a friend's outside deck, basically rooftop. Yeah, we just like sort of join one end of the chain to there's like on top of this friend's rooftop. There's a special structure that's got a water tank on top, and this ladder that you climb up to the water tank. And we just like join one part of the chain to the top of that structure and the lower end to his rooftop wall. So the chain sort of came down. Yeah, in fact, you saw a photo of it in my presentation. Yeah, but yeah, with those chain gardens, you can just hook lots of so-called chain pots to them, and each one can grow like a herb or a spinach or even a small lettuce. Yeah, the sky's the limit. There's no limit really. You just use the
To keep away
yeah.
slugs. So if the slugs don't like climbing up chains, that would work.
You won't have slug problems. You might have caterpillar problems if the butterflies land on them and lay eggs, but you won't have any problems with land-based slugs. They won't climb that far.
Slugs.
But yeah, there's just one thing, just one little caution about using chain gardens, and that's if you're using them during the summer, like because the chain pot's so small, the soil inside them's going to dry out really quickly, so you'll have to make sure that you water them frequently. But in autumn and spring, go for it. The sky's the limit. Yeah, I get school kids to make those. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's just where to anchor them on our blank wall sort of thing.
Oh yeah. Well, if it's difficult to secure the end of a chain to a wall, if you have like a water pipe, like a horizontal water pipe, you just got to if you've got the water pipe like this pen, you just like get the chain and you wrap the chain around the water pipe, and then you just use a hook to hook the end of the chain to itself.
Oh, yeah.
So it's in a loop like that. So like you don't have to tie the chain to anything. You just put the chain around the water pipe, and then you just hook it to itself with one hook. That's it. Yep.
Okay.
Hmm.
Thank you. I'll try.
I hope that you learned something. Hopefully more than one thing.
I'll definitely learn something. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us, Abigail. And I'm glad you asked that
for
question.
joining us
We'd like
again.
to interact with people live if possible.
Yeah, I've been listening along. My kids have been really noisy in the background.
All right.
Well, thanks for muting. We appreciate that. It can be quite a struggle when people don't mute themselves, and yeah, all we're hearing is screaming in the background. What are you doing? We've got kids as well, so we know what it's like.
All right.
Well, it's
Yeah.
11:45. Maybe we should wrap up, John. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So
Oh.
our next one will probably be November. What is it now? October. Oh, that's next month. Yeah. So yeah, you'll no doubt see some news about it. Our next fantastic farming number 7. Yeah, feel free to join and tell your friends. There we go. That's going to be good.
Yeah, I'm looking forward as well. And we've already got some ideas for topics. And like I was saying to John, I might try to reach out to this woman who's doing black soldier fly larva composting, which is just so exciting. I mean, I'm such a geek to be talking and gushing about this, but it is the most fascinating thing in my life right now is black soldier fly larva composting. So I really got to get more into this because it could be a game changer for disposing of raw waste materials here in Japan, where everything is burned and hauled away with tons of gasoline used and everything else. I think it's just going to be a fabulous way, especially for those of us who like compost in our garden. And if you've ever tried it, trust me, you like compost in your garden. It is the best thing in your garden. So it's just, again, sorry to gush, but I'm a geek. What I got to say? We've got a gardening show. What do you expect? But anyway, if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much. I was amazed that one of my videos actually got over 20,000 views. So YouTube started putting ads on there. I'm like, woohoo, I'm going to get a paycheck. Nope, not until I have 1,000 subscribers. So I always hear people say it, and I didn't know why, but please subscribe because it would help me to get that 1,000 mark. And then I'm getting a little bit of money coming in to help me pay the bills. That would be fantastic. But other than that, you can watch our other episodes. This is number 6. All 6 of them are here on my YouTube channel, so check them out. And there's some other ones in there that can help you maybe get started with some of your gardening experience. I do encourage everybody to reach out to John and myself. You'll see our contact info at the end of this video. My website, midorifarm.net, is a great way to get in touch with me. I accept volunteers almost year round, except for the middle of the winter. And I do have events going on all the time. In fact, a week from today, we'll be out at my farm harvesting sweet potatoes with a big group of people. And that's always a great event to get people out, get their hands dirty, pulling those big tubers out of the ground. We'll have a nice lunch. We'll be shelling soybeans that'll be used to make miso. I was going to show you, but we ran out of time. This is my giant 7 kilograms of miso that I made last year that's now ready to eat. We're going to have that at the event as well. Awesome. Nothing like having your own black soybean organic homemade miso. I got to say, that's one of the most, again, I'm a geek. What am I going to say? I just think it's a wonderful thing to have that closed loop system, access to great food, healthy body, and great community, and wonderful people like Abigail and John to in the adventure.
That's awesome. Well done. Yeah. How long did that take to make, just out of interest?
The miso we made in March. So it ferments for about 7 or 8 months, they say, is about right. But then it'll keep for years. And evidently, the longer it's kept, the richer the flavor. So
sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can email me some. Yeah. When the technology gets developed.
Well, we're going to shell the soybeans next weekend, and then I'm going to keep them and then have a miso making event next spring. So
sounds good.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks for joining. Hope you learned something. Hope to see you again next time. Reach out with any questions you might have. And good luck growing your food for yourself, by yourself, because it's never for yourself or by yourself when you're part of a gardening community. And have a good one.
Yeah. See you later. Thanks a lot.